Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 365. This morning, we were talking about Jeffrey Epstein and his vast offshore footprint and the many different LLCs and shell companies that he owned or was involved with. And we talked about a company called Appleby a little bit. And I said that tonight on the Daily Drop, we'd add a little bit of context to that, and we dive in a little bit deeper and try and figure out just who in the hell this company is and what they do. So I have a relatively long article to share with you folks tonight. This is another article from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and it's part of their Paradise Papers investigation. So this article was originally published in November of 2017. Headline: Offshore Magic Circle. Law firm has record of compliance failures. A secret stash of documents provide inside view of storied legal practice founded in Bermuda. This article was authored by Will Fitzgibbon. And right off the bat, this storied legal practice, so storied that they had a list a mile long of degenerate criminals that they were doing business with, people that they knew were shady, people that they knew were criminals, but they don't care. It's all about the bottom line for these people. The means justifies the end. When Robert Woods, an ex-cop from Liverpool, took a job in early 2006 as a compliance manager for Appleby, the global offshore law firm, he joined an organization that had problems. Appleby's Cayman Islands office, where he worked, for example, had more than 600 clients on its books whose records were labeled non-compliant, meaning that the firm had no current IDs, contact information, or other particulars needed to make sure it wasn't setting up shell companies and other structures for criminals or corrupt politicians. More than 600 clients on their books, folks, when Mr. Robert Woods, an ex-cop from Liverpool, took over. And those records were labeled as non-compliant. No IDs, no contact information, no particulars whatsoever, not even a utility bill, all right? And yet, no problem, we'll still set you guys up. We'll still get you guys in business. We'll get you rolling. How much are you paying us? Who's dropping the bag off? That's really all these companies care about. That's really all these kind of law firms care about as well. And the crazy part is, this law firm this year is up for all kinds of awards still. Even when these sorts of entities are outed, even when they're put on blast, the legacy media doesn't do the right thing. This sort of thing should be widespread. This sort of information should be pounding you the way they pound you with the gaslighting about hating your neighbors. But they don't want you educated. They want you stupid. They want you dumbed down, and they want you ignorant. Five years later, Woods had moved up in the firm, taking over as its director of compliance. But things hadn't improved much, at least according to a PowerPoint presentation he appears to have put together sometime near the end of 2011. And I saw that several times with my own company that I worked for, Cantor Fitzgerald. I saw people move up through the company ranks. They love to promote from within. And then you would see people move from auditing all the way into deep compliance. And these people were, company men, company women. And let's just say that the gaming division of Cantor Fitzgerald, all you have to do is go ahead and Google Cantor Gaming, and you'll see the long list of slip-ups the company made when I'm talking about legally speaking. And there was no compliance. The compliance department was completely stepped on. And when you have people that are powerful in positions like director positions or vice president positions who are wielding a lot of power within the company structure, well, they're going to step on these compliance managers, these low-level compliance managers, and they'll go directly to the boss or the director or the vice president. And you see it all the damn time with these sorts of firms, and the same shit was obviously occurring here. The 44-page training slideshow, which featured images from the HBO mafia drama The Sopranos, recalled lowlights of Appleby's recent history. Under a slide titled Terrorist Financing Offenses, the notes read, "We have a current case where we are sitting on about $400,000 that is definitely tainted and it is not easy to deal with." And that's just them, what they're willing to admit for their slideshow here, right? For training purposes. If they're admitting that they're sitting on 400,000 racks for some terrorist, then who the hell knows what else they're sitting on? How many dirty-ass politicians are using them to set up LLCs or to move money around or to do something that's on the fringes of the law that probably should be regulated. In another case, Wood's notes indicated Appleby set up a trust for a client to buy property in London and accepted money on his behalf without question. How's that even possible? There are so many different channels and levers that need to be pulled on hoops you have to jump through when it comes to money. How is all this money being moved around with nobody being none the wiser, without the IRS or, oh yeah, that's right. That's why they're offshore, see? And that's the whole point, folks. The whole point is to be in a place where the money can't be regulated or won't be regulated. And they continue to use these tax havens and nothing is ever done about it. There's no regulatory body. You know, you have different bodies around the world that work in conjunction, but we see how toothless they are. Nobody goes to jail for this shit. Go and try and embezzle a few $1,000 or steal a few $1,000s and see how quick your ass gets sent to Corona capital of the world, aka jail. See how quickly it happens. But these people steal billions. We're talking generational wealth. And a slap on the wrist, a few $100 million in fines, which is peanuts to them. Appleby later learned the presentation acknowledged that the trust was owned by a former Pakistani official who had been charged with embezzling public money and had infiltrated allegedly corrupt funds into our business. So you see, look, in the real world, if you and I were doing business together and you had ill-gotten gains and I was profiting from your ill-gotten gains, I would be wrapped up in your criminal conspiracy. I would be caught up in your RICO case. But that doesn't happen to Mr. Pakistani official here, huh? Nah, just goes about his business, stealing from an already impoverished people, taking money from people that, already are having trouble getting shit organized, getting stuff right. And you have this scumbag that comes in, steals money from them, laughs all the way to the bank in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda, and then these assholes at Appleby facilitating the whole entire mess. Some of the crap we accept is amazing, totally amazing, the presentation's notes said beneath a slide listing the information Appleby employees needed to know about its clients. So they have like a slideshow that goes along with this, a couple of clips from the slideshow. So make sure you click on the link and you check this stuff out. The slideshow looks like any slideshow you would expect if you were in some sort of corporate meeting. I'm sure a bunch of you out there have worked for corporations where you have to go and do, you have meetings where slideshows are used and, you're going through like management training, whatever it may be. That's what one of these slideshows look like. This slideshow looks like right here. It's absolutely ridiculous. Dealing with billions of dollars and we have to go through a slideshow for you to tell me not to accept tainted money? What in the hell? A leak of 6.8 million confidential records reveals, among other things, how Appleby has sometimes failed to keep out questionable clients. before Wood's 2011 PowerPoint, and since then. The documents expose the secret offshore lives of politicians and fraudsters and elaborate tax avoidance strategies pursued by Apple, Nike, and other corporate giants. Now remember that when Nike and Apple are out there virtue signaling and they're out there like they care about the common man and they care about the cause and they care about the problems that people in the inner cities and the working class poor are dealing with, just remember that they don't really care. It's all lip service. They're getting their gear made over in China by slave labor. They're not paying taxes in America. And at the same time, they're standing on their ivory towers, talking down to the rest of us. It's an absolute joke. Apple, Nike, and these other gigantic corporations, this corporatocracy that we find ourselves living under is very disturbing, folks. And these people continuously get away with it. The emails, client records, bank applications, court papers, and other files were obtained by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung and shared with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and other media organizations. They represent the inner workings of Appleby from the 1950s until 2016. The files include documents from the firm's corporate services division, which became independent in 2016 under the name Astera. Now remember, Jeffrey Epstein was involved with this. There are some 500 pages about Liquid Funding, LTD. And they were wrapped up, remember, with Bears and Stearns and the securities and the whole entire collapse in 2008, 2009. So that's where the Jeffrey Epstein tie is here, right? And overall, this is the sort of thing that Jeffrey Epstein loved to be involved with. And we know that Les Wexner, by the way, was also a client of Appleby. So how many coincidences are there going to be, right? Do they expect us to accept? Because there are way too many coincidences for me. And just on the pure knowledge that we have, the circumstantial evidence, there is plenty of probable cause to initiate a deep investigation into people like Wexner. And this law firm, Appleby, I'm sure that they have their asses covered, right? But there needs to be some sort of strong regulation that gets slapped on people like this as well. Appleby did not provide ICIJ with answers to detailed questions. Instead, it released a media statement online that said the firm is committed to high standards. Following a thorough and vigorous investigation, Appleby said, it rejects any allegations of wrongdoing by the company or its clients. Astera did not respond to questions. So a vigorous investigation, I'm guessing investigating themselves. Let's go get some of our bocce ball partners. Let's go get Biff and Buffy from the country club to come and investigate us. That's what I envision when I hear about investigations from these people. Why don't they have real independent investigations? It's because they all have something to hide, it would seem. I know it's cynical to look at things that way, but when you have so much circumstantial evidence provided to you and you see the way that these businesses conduct themselves, it's hard not to be. Appleby said, we are an offshore law firm who advises clients on legitimate and lawful ways to conduct their business. We do not tolerate illegal behavior. It is true that we are not infallible. Where we find that mistakes have happened, we act quickly to put things right, and we make the necessary notifications to relevant authorities. Yeah, I'm sure that that's exactly what they do. I'm sure that's how they keep their client list growing strong. Yeah, we're going to report you to the authorities. Come on, stop it. That's not why people are coming to these law firms. They're not going to these law firms because they want to self-check themselves. They're looking for those technicalities. They want those loopholes. All those dirtbag incumbents should be voted out. All of them. Appleby, which was founded in Bermuda, is one of the world's most prestigious offshore law firms. Although Appleby is not a tax advisor, the 119-year-old law firm is a leading member of the global network of lawyers, accountants, bankers, and other operatives who set up and manage offshore companies and bank accounts for clients who want to avoid taxes or keep their finances under wraps. Look, I get it. Nobody wants to pay taxes, man. I don't want to pay taxes either, right? And when I do have to pay taxes, I want them to be fair. But how is it ever going to be the case if these people aren't paying a goddamn thing? If these people are able to just, one phone call and a couple strokes on a keyboard send millions and millions of dollars offshore to where it can't be regulated or no taxes are paid on it? I mean, come on. Enough is enough, all right? Even somebody who detests the high taxes, the strangulation of taxes, has to see that when it comes to the games that these people are playing, that a lid needs to be put on top of it. Because remember, this is the blood that is pumping through the heart of enterprises just like Jeffrey Epstein's. Along with helping to set up shell companies, trusts, and other offshore entities, the firm has various subsidiaries, affiliates, and business units that draft wills, represent clients involved in litigation over workplace accidents or divorce, and advise corporations. North Americans account for the biggest part of Appleby's workload. The firm has worked for residents of all 50 U.S. states. Well, yeah. Of course. And as mad as we want to be at these lawyers for using these loopholes or for using these backdoors, the biggest problem are the laws themselves, folks. The laws themselves have to be changed. And if we don't vote in people with courage and we don't vote in people who are willing to do the right thing, then it's lost. There's no point in any of it. Because these people just keep on getting fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter on the wealth and the hard work of the United States of America. And in the meantime, the United States of America gets jack shit in return. Appleby sees itself as an industry leader, proving to the world that the offshore industry can operate cleanly and professionally. We provide innovative, timely, and ethical advice, the firm advertises in its 8-page brochure. And look, again, it's not just places like Applebee's, right? We would be naive just to point all of the blame there. They're a symptom of the problem. They're not the problem. The real problem are the people who write these laws. And the reason they write the laws the way they do is because they're the ones benefiting from them. Pretty sure most of us out there listening to the podcast, certainly myself, pretty sure none of us have offshore accounts. Pretty sure it's an event when any of us are, even visiting offshore anywhere. Never mind having an account in some exotic island locale. Over cocktails, at working dinners, and around conference tables, it meets with representatives of major clients, many of which are leading banks and accounting firms such as KPMG, Ernst & Young, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. In the Cayman Islands, half of Appleby's top 20 clients in 2014 were major banks and investment firms, including Citigroup, Bank of America, HSBC, Credit Suisse, and Wells Fargo. All of just, incredibly reputable reputation, right? Said nobody ever. All of these banks are criminal. All of them involved in all kinds of nonsense. And should it shock anyone that they are clients of Appleby? Of course not. Wherever there is some chum in the water, you can find these disgusting ass sharks. And it's inevitable that Jeffrey Epstein won't be far behind either whenever you start talking about ways to move money offshore or manipulate a financial system. Because if the guy was good at anything, he was good at stealing. When ICIJ and its media partners began publishing the Panama Papers investigation in April 2016, offshore promoters downplayed its significance. They said Mossack Fonseca, the Panama headquartered law firm at the center of the scandal, was an outlier. Yeah, okay, sure. So they were just the ones who got caught, right? Not that they're not an outlier. They were just the ones who got caught. It would seem that all of you fools are engaging in this sort of behavior. Mossack Fonseca represents one of the last bastions of shadowy international financial system that is rapidly ceasing to exist, the trade magazine Wealth Management reported. God, the cover that these guys are provided by some in the media is disgusting, downright nauseating. Appleby's internal files show, however, that even when offshore law firms invest large amounts of money and effort to stay compliant and reputable, the secrecy and the lure of financial gain at the heart of the shadow economy make it difficult for offshore operatives to avoid doing business with criminals, corrupt politicians, and other questionable clients. And that's just the way it goes. That is how this game is played. And if anything, I hope that I've been able to deliver that message to you folks broadside. Because we're all being gamed and we're all being conned and we're all being jobbed by these scuzzballs in the banking sector, in the financial sector, on K Street, and certainly the crooked-ass politicians that they send to D.C. to do their bidding. Money laundering is a dirty crime, screamed the notes to Wood's 2011 PowerPoint presentation. Appearing in all caps for emphasis, there is usually always a victim at the bottom of the pile and a rich person at the top. Well, we see that with Epstein, right? The victims turned survivors were the ones at the bottom. And Jeffrey Epstein was the man at the top of all the money laundering. And that was the blood of the enterprise, right? The blood of the operation is this laundered money, this shadow money. And it's also how the CIA conducts itself with its shadow operations, its black sites. It is an absolute stain on civilization, and they need to get a handle on it. Woods, who is still Appleby's director of compliance, declined to comment when ICIJ asked him whether, in his view, the firm had improved its client screening practices since 2011. Basically, dude pleaded the fifth, right? He's like, I'm making X amount of dollars. I'm not trying to rock the boat and talk to you cats. It's a dog-eat-dog world, right? Greed is good, right? That's the way this dude's conducting himself. He's like, I ain't talking to none of you. I ain't opening my mouth. Not a single word coming out of my mouth. I enjoy my cush gig. The presentation is one of at least 4 PowerPoint offerings drafted by Appleby's compliance team between 2007 and 2015 that raised questions about how well the firm checked out its clients. It is unclear whether these presentations were made before Appleby employees. But in each of them, speakers' remarks at the bottom of the slides provide unguarded commentary from insiders about Appleby's compliance fumbles. 80% of the battle is won or lost at the gate, read the text with the slide used repeatedly in Appleby compliance presentations. If we let in the wrong clients, we set ourselves up for a fall. And I would think that Jeffrey Epstein would be considered a wrong client, huh? I would think some of these other scumbags like Mr. Pakistani war criminal guy, probably not the best client to have as part of your company. And I'm sure if we dig even deeper, there will be 7 degrees of separation with Epstein. How many of Epstein's people are going to be found throughout all of this shit? I'm sure a ton. Magic Circle. Appleby was born in 1898 in the British colony of Bermuda as the private practice of Major Reginald Woodfield Appleby, a tea-drinking, cricket-playing, rifle-shooting magistrate who became a member of the island's parliament and was knighted for public services in Bermuda. Translation, being a colonialist in Bermuda, I guess is what they mean there. What else was he being knighted for? I mean, come on, man, give me a break. Such was his status that when a vacationing Major Appleby sailed to England in 1924, the Royal Gazette and Colonist Daily predicted a rise in crime during his absence. Oh yeah, because the natives are such bad people that if this Appleby character left the island for a vacation, that they were going to rise up. And it's such, just take a look. And the newspaper back then was saying it as well, folks, okay? They've been gaslighting you and conditioning you for way too long. It is time to tell them to go get stuffed. When Bermuda's legislature met in July 1940 to debate the island's first income tax, Major Appleby spoke out, aligning himself with those who look on all income tax as man's last refinement of torture, to be resisted at all costs, reported the Royal Gazette. And while I would tend to agree with him, that means you have to do the right thing as a corporation. That's your part of the deal. If you want to get a lower tax rate, 15% flat tax or whatever have you. But one thing is certainly clear. As much as we can't trust these politicians, we cannot trust these corporations not to do the right thing, not to take care of their employees, and certainly not to pay their taxes. Bermuda has never looked back. It continues to entice locals and foreigners with a zero tax rate. Since expanding outside Bermuda in 1979, Appleby has transformed itself into a global institution with more than 700 employees spread across nearly every major tax haven, from the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean to the Isle of Man in Europe and Hong Kong in Asia. You seem like a monster, which is a good thing, one Appleby client responded in a 2013 satisfaction survey. Yeah, a monster indeed. If you only knew how telling those words really were, considering the people that they were in bed with. Appleby collects Offshore Law Firm of the Year awards and is cited as part of what insiders call the Offshore Magical Circle, an informal collection of the world's biggest offshore law firms which jostle for the same business. The Offshore Magic Circle? I mean, really? The Magic Circle, huh? Why is it the Magic Circle? Oh, is it because they know all of the loopholes? Is it because they have all of the ties with the politicians? Is it because they're friends with all of those people? Nah, nothing to do with that. They're just good at their jobs, I guess. Former employees serve as members of parliament, judges, and other government officials, and at least one low-tax jurisdiction, the Cook Islands, used Appleby's expertise to draw up its own offshore laws. Talk about having the fox in the henhouse. I mean, are you guys kidding me right now? The Cook Islands would use Appleby's to draw up its offshore laws? How could that ever possibly go wrong? Publicly, the firm has burnished its image by sponsoring the America's Cup, 5K family runs, and cake sales. Well, where have we seen that as well? What have we learned about these people and their charitable givings? What have we learned about these people who set up these kinds of charities? We have learned that they wrap themselves in them like armor when shit inevitably ends up going south. And what do you see here right away? Oh, we sponsored the America's Cup. We do 5K runs. They're absolutely ridiculous. And for the longest time, we would have been like, oh, they do some good work. We have to, But no, I'm done looking at things like that when it comes to these corporations that have been caught over and over again with their hand in the cookie jar. It's not like a first-time issue. Oh, one person slid by us, then our compliance caught up with them and we launched them. They wouldn't have said shit if it wasn't for these Paradise Paper leaks. In advertising material, Appleby vaunts its benevolent undertakings, including working to help Nigeria recover money from the family of former dictator Sani Abacha and administering a multi-million-dollar fund to support nurses treating Ebola patients in West Africa. How many billions and billions of laundered money have you steered away from these very communities that you're talking about protecting, that you're talking about caring about? The absurdity of it all. Its clients include princesses, prime ministers, and Hollywood stars. Appleby has worked for some of the world's wealthiest oligarchs from Russia, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. In the firm's Bermuda office, more than 1 in 10 companies had ties to clients with political connections, including politicians, their families, or their close associates, according to an internal memo. And that's how a lot of the politicians in America get by. They have their families set up these LLCs, and then they use their influence for their families to enrich themselves. Been happening forever, folks. But now that curtain's getting drawn back, my question to you is, are you going to just sit by and allow it? Or are you going to demand change? Are you going to demand accountability at the very top? Many of the highest profile clients were managed by separate Appleby teams of trust specialists. In April 2016, Appleby announced the launch of Estera, formerly the firm's profitable fiduciary arm, which manages the company's trusts, jets, and other assets of the global elite. Appleby and the new company remain close. Some former Appleby employees now work for Estera from the same office address they occupied before. And man, it's a lot, right? They're managing all sorts of assets for the global elite, right? All right. So, why is Les Wexner one of their clients if Jeffrey Epstein's managing his finances? Doesn't make any sense to me, does it? Sure seems like there is more there than they're letting on. Certainly some smoke. And usually when there's smoke, well, usually there's some fire. And the fact that Estera and Appleby are working from the same office address that they occupied before is certainly a tell that while they might have split the company, it's still the same entity. Appleby's recipe for success appears to have worked for the firm and its customers. Appleby books more than $100 million a year in revenue. Clients tell the firm that they find it hardworking and friendly. One happy fee payer told Appleby that its brand is a bit like being stranded in the middle of Africa and seeing a British Airways plane land. You know you're going to get out of there. Well, that's nice, huh? That's real nice. Good thing you got your lifeline, buddy. Good thing that, you and your thieving pals in the corporatocracy and the banksters in the financial sector are all taken care of. Good thing that you got your British Airways plane coming into land while the rest of us are stuck in the desert with no water. Real nice. Scumbag elite. Appleby shares its customers' confidence. Days after last year's publication of the Panama Papers, Appleby turned down an offer from a risk consulting firm of a refresher training course on preventing money laundering. The law firm declined, explaining that it has extremely robust controls in place. We don't have the need for your sessions this time round. No, of course not. They were doing well enough grifting as it was. They didn't need some overreaching outside entity to come in and tell them they're not stealing right. The audacity of it all. Steaming turd. On June 29th, 1993, with memories of the Persian Gulf War still fresh, a U.S. House subcommittee convened to discuss Iraq's nuclear weapons program. Iraq had breached an agreement to allow United Nations inspectors to examine the country's uranium stockpile, and international concerns were high. Iraq continues to flaunt its military power, massacring its own citizens in the north and Iraqi Shiites in the south. Representative Tom Lantos, Democrat of California, said in opening remarks just after 10 a.m. that day. Oh boy, you want to talk about killing its own citizens? How about the displacement of Iraq after George Bush and his warmongering criminals put their hands into the mix there? Talk about war criminals. While Saddam Hussein was quite the scumbag, no doubt about it, it's ironic to hear some of these lawmakers try and paint Hussein as the scumbag when they're involved in the same shit. They might not be killing their own citizens, but they're killing citizens elsewhere. Lantos read into the record a report from the subcommittee staff. Among its findings was that Crescent Petroleum, a major private oil company, was being investigated by U.S. authorities to determine whether it was a front company for Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. Even if Crescent wasn't manufacturing weapons itself, the report stated, it was certainly linked to the principal Iraqi organization that was. Crescent then, as now, denied wrongdoing. Well, look, they could deny wrongdoing all they want, but there are so many instances of these front companies that we have seen, especially just in our small little sliver of investigation into the Epstein case, that I don't know how anyone can't be cynical of all of these people at this point. The June 29th hearing was broadcast live in the United States, but it doesn't appear to have been noticed by Appleby's office in Bermuda. Crescent Petroleum, owned by Hamid Jafar, had been an Appleby client since 1984. For nearly 30 years, Appleby's relationship with Crescent proceeded smoothly, according to the law firm's files. It was only after Appleby was asked to help restructure Crescent in 2013 that the firm appeared to notice Jafar's background, including that his brother had headed Iraq's nuclear weapons program under Saddam Hussein. "We have had this relationship for some time now," one Appleby lawyer wrote. "How can we not have known this earlier?" And that's the rub, right? Legally speaking, they can use the excuse, well, we didn't know. But in reality, we all know that they knew. They were in bed with these people since '84. And they didn't know who they were in bed with? Come on, really? They really expect us to buy that? While rules and regulations vary, in many of Appleby's busiest offices, great chunks of its work are governed by rules that require offshore providers to keep accurate records on who is using their services, for what purposes, and where the money comes from. Another client who appeared to fall through the cracks was Ehud Eri Laniado, director and co-owner of Omega Diamonds, a Belgian company operating on the Antwerp Diamond Exchange. In May 2013, Belgian news media reported that Omega Diamonds had agreed to pay about $200 million to settle allegations that the company had not declared income from African diamonds. Omega did not admit liability, and the case did not involve Laniado personally. Months later, Appleby accepted 2 payments from Laniado worth $5,000, and the money was placed in the law firm's bank account on behalf of an offshore trust. So we have this guy here who is involved in a diamond company for the Antwerp that's on the Antwerp Diamond Exchange, and I would guess that probably dealing with some shady characters in the world of diamonds. I know that there has been a great effort to regulate the diamond trade, but I am sure that there are still pockets of very disturbing behavior that occur, and the bloodshed over these diamonds in Africa is unacceptable. The local strife that it causes is unacceptable. And the fact that this scumbag was doing business with Appleby shouldn't shock anyone at this point, 39 minutes and 24 seconds into this article. Later, When Laniato wanted to create a new trust, an Appleby employee noted news reports about Omega Diamond's legal problems, but cleared the law firm to do business with them. Appleby created the new trust for him in April 2014. C'est la vie! Yeah, it's all good. Do whatever you want. Come on, we'll hook you up, Blood Diamond guy. No worries, we're going to set you up with this trust. Everything is all good. Woods, Appleby's compliance director, was upset when he found out about Laniato 3 months later. This is a trust structure, and the allegations are extremely serious and relate to blood diamonds, Woods wrote to a colleague in July 2014. Why was this not brought to my attention before the conflict check was cleared? Well, because you don't have the proper restraints in place. You don't have the proper structure in place within your own entity. If your subordinates are making these decisions without bringing this to you, maybe you should fire them. In fact, maybe you should be fired for not running a tight ship. Despite Woods' concerns, Appleby kept Laniato as a client. Woods agreed that although Laniato was high risk, due to involvement in the diamond industry, we have enough mitigating factors and information to be comfortable with the business. In fact, it should be a good piece of business all around. Yeah, no problem. These guys are just killing, natives and working people to death in these diamond mines. No big deal. We'll do business with this guy. There's no blood on our hands. It's all good. We'll take his money, and then we'll repurpose his money for other disgusting schemes. But he told colleagues that the episode represented a failure of our processes. He warned that the firm's business units, such as Appleby Trust Cayman Ltd., shouldn't let the quest for short-term profits overshadow the need to follow rules that required Appleby to assess the risks Laniato posed and to know who he was, what he wanted to do offshore. So, this is the sort of stuff that should just be basic, right? These sort of safeguards, these sort of regulations, a stringent background check. This is the sort of thing that should be very stringent, but it's not. And again, it goes back to the jerk-offs who write the laws. It goes back to the scumbags who we elect. What's done is done, but going forward, whilst being commercial, please let us try to ensure that we don't get carried away with fee-earning potential, Woods wrote. The law firm must be cognizant of the fact that whilst they may be raking in the fees, the trust company carries the significant risk in administering the subsequent structure. The trust company must be aware that at the end of the day, if it all goes wrong, they will be left holding the steaming turd. It is Friday, and holding the bag did not sound strong enough. Yeah, well, look. You all should be left holding the steaming turd, right? All of the people who were in charge, everybody who was, their job was to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen, fired, everybody fired, new people have to be brought in, and keep repeating the process until people get the idea. And the way to do that and ensure that is for regulation of this industry. Appleby was still acting as trustee for the Laniato's trust as of early 2016, the firm's internal records show. Woods and Appleby did not respond to specific requests for comment. Laniato's legal counsel responded to ICIJ on his behalf, but requested the contents of the response not to be published. Laniato has previously stated that he has never had any involvement with blood diamonds. Well, I don't know one way or the other. I've never really researched the man, but chances are, if you're involved with diamonds over in Africa, you don't have clean hands. We are exposed. In day-to-day operations, Appleby uses software designed to reduce human error and identify risky clients. The firm's manual requires employees to screen potential clients with a thorough online search and update records on anyone connected to politics once every year. The firm and its subsidiaries have carried out internal audits, kept spreadsheets on what it called problematic companies, and produced yellow cards to ensure that company information was accurate. Yellow cards? What is this? A FIFA-regulated soccer match? Yeah, you're going to get a yellow card. Or what is this, pride fighting from the 2000s? Yeah, that's it. You're stalling. We're going to need you to get busy working again. Yellow card my ass. How about jail sentences? The controls worked, for example, when Appleby's office in the British Virgin Islands rejected business involving Boris Shemyakin, a Russian real estate mogul, after online background checks showed that he had been indicted in Russia on charges involving a multi-billion-dollar fraud. He denies wrongdoing. Yeah, they didn't work with Jeffrey Epstein, did they? The law firm also declined to work with the global accounting firm Ernst & Young when it approached Appleby for possible help with the purchase of two $20 million Gulfstream jets for two sons of a former government minister in Azerbaijan and a man named, I'm gonna slaughter this, sorry folks, Manu Chechar Kanaga. Appleby checked the WikiLeaks database of U.S. diplomatic cables and learned that one of the U.S. embassy's contacts referred to Kanaga as frontman for a former politician who headed what the U.S. cables called one of the most corrupt operations in Azerbaijan. Appleby declined the work. Well, that's nice, huh? Every now and then they have to make it look like they're doing the right thing, right? And if you're going to walk, you might as well walk on one of these oligarchs. The funniest thing about all of that is that Ernst & Young was involved. Ernst & Young was the auditing firm that we used at CG. And they were a bunch of dodos, a bunch of absolute fools. Conga could not be reached for comment. Ernst & Young said it could not comment on individual matters, but that it is committed to financial, legal, and regulatory compliance in all of its work. Shoddy-ass work. I know it from first-hand experience. I would never use them as an auditing firm. Appleby knew the risks. Slap bang in the center of a PowerPoint slide prepared for a 2012 training session in Bermuda was a gray headstone bearing the name Arthur Anderson. A reference to the audit firm convicted of obstruction of justice in 2002 for having destroyed documents relating to an investigation into the collapse of the energy giant Enron. The Supreme Court overturned the conviction, but the firm was unable to recover. And that whole Enron situation was incredibly crazy. I believe the movie or biopic is called The Smartest Men in the Room. Something like that, and it's about Enron, and it was just a really good documentary. I'll find out the actual name of that, and I'll update that on the morning update, because it really is a good movie if you're interested in stuff like this. And what went on with Enron was just absolutely absurd. If Appleby didn't do a better job of monitoring clients, the presentation suggested, employees could find themselves caught up in high-profile financial scandals like David Duncan, the former Anderson auditor who pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, and hedge fund manager Rajaratnam, who was pictured in handcuffs as FBI agents arrested him for a multi-million-dollar security fraud case. He was later convicted. "We are exposed," the slideshow warned. "This is not the best we can do." And again, I bring up Jeffrey Epstein again because that's the most relevant thing we talk about here, obviously. And the fact that they had Epstein as a client suggests that they did zero background checks, okay? Because we all know that all it takes is a quick Google search now or then, and the rumors were out there about Jeffrey Epstein. Between 2005 and 2015, more than a dozen internal and regulatory examinations of Appleby's offices in the Isle of Man, the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, and London found flaws that could have involved Appleby in litigation and had financial and reputation implications. So even though they get all of these awards and there are, people are cheering them and, they're part of the magical circle, it's obvious that they're definitely not playing by the rules, or playing by the rules in some instances, while in others, certainly looking the other way. After a 2005 review by a regulatory agency, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, Appleby's trust company was ordered to improve 21 deficiencies in its performance and to obtain fresh, accurate records of its clients' passports, addresses, and sources of wealth. Later, despite improvements, Appleby's head of compliance then, Ian Patrick, wrote, "I still believe that a huge effort will be required before we can be considered to be an offshore leader from a compliance perspective." Yeah, and they have not done that since, right? Obviously not. The next year, an internal audit by Patrick at the British Virgin Islands office looked at 45 clients and found that only one of them met Appleby's standards. Of the 5 Appleby offices reviewed around that time, Patrick reported that only the Hong Kong office kept its documents in good order. So of all of the offices, only the Hong Kong office, according to Patrick, kept their documents in good order. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars. How is it that they're the only ones that kept their documents in order? How is that even possible? I mean, it is an absolute joke to even think that a company like this would have offices that are in disrepair or not in good order. An internal audit of the Cayman Islands Trust Office in 2008 found the risk of breaking laws in Appleby's own protocols to be high in more than half of all the categories under review. The audit report noted a risk of fraudulent activities and said Appleby may not be complying with the law. Oh, may not be, huh? Obviously they weren't. And now I'm not saying in every case they were just willy-nilly, engaged in all this fraud and money laundering, but I'm sure that they were picking their spots. In a 2012 review by regulators in the British Virgin Islands found holes in Appleby's procedures for dealing with high-risk politicians and associates. An internal 2015 spot check of the Isle of Man office revealed other problems, including one offshore company co-owned by a Palestinian official for which Appleby's lacked detailed information about an $11.2 million loan. So you got an offshore company co-owned by a Palestinian official, and they had no detailed information on an $11.2 million loan. Don't pay your car payment for a couple of months and see how quick they come and swipe up your car. But if you want an $11.2 million loan, and if you're a Palestinian official, no problem, we'll hook you up. When the Bermuda Monetary Authority audited an Appleby subsidiary in October 2014, it found key or highly significant weaknesses in 9 areas. Nearly half, 46% of the files reviewed by the agency lacked information on the origin of the money Appleby managed for its clients. There was no evidence that Appleby identified risks of money laundering and terrorism financing, the agency said, and the firm had not adopted the recommendations from previous audits. And the only evidence you need is that Jeffrey Epstein chose to use this company. Jeffrey Epstein, of all people, would not be using a company that was very stringent, that was very hard charging in situations like this. He would use a company that some of his buddies had told him about that has a reputation for facilitating scumbags such as himself. These omissions have heightened the authority's concern about the firm's regulatory compliance and control environment, the agency said. In October 2015, an Appleby director disclosed in a confidential document to government regulators in the British Virgin Islands that the Bermuda office had settled a fine imposed by Bermuda regulators after it conceded that it had failed to follow up on many of the agency's recommendations for fixing weaknesses in its anti-money laundering net. And that's how it always works, right? Oh, they settled a fine. Oh, a fine. And the regulators in Bermuda and these islands, they'll take that money, right? We see how the Virgin Islands wants Jeffrey Epstein's money, and they're glad to take that money. And then the people just do it again. And it just keeps going on and on and on, and the scenario repeats itself. Commit crime, pay fine. Commit crime, pay fine. Commit crime, pay fine. Commit crime, pay fine. No one ever goes to jail. Appleby's internal records show that the firm set aside $500,000 for the fine, but its existence has never been publicly disclosed. There was no public censure, the director wrote, adding that Bermuda's regulators agreed to keep the matter entirely private. Oh, I'm sure they did. I wonder how many bags of loot they got for that. The whole privacy thing is just a joke. And all of these nations, including America, that conduct themselves in the shadows without transparency for the people it's sickening. I'm done with it. These people need to act accordingly, okay? And they need to quit benefiting and growing their own wealth on the backs of the working poor. A spokesman for the Bermuda Monetary Authority told ICIJ that it would not confirm or deny enforcement decisions. In 2016, the spokesman said, the authority changed its policy and now publishes details of fines and other sanctions online. Oh, they really stepped up to the plate, huh? Although I will say any step towards transparency is a good thing, right? And the more transparency we have, the better off things will be. We are subject to frequent regulatory checks, and we are committed to achieve the high standards set by our regulators, Appleby stated in a press release published 1 month after first receiving ICIJ's questions. The same people that got that $500,000 fine? Those regulators? Is that who we're talking about here? Having researched the ICIJ's allegations, we believe they are unfounded and based on a lack of understanding of the legitimate and lawful structures used in the offshore sector. Oh yeah, it's because we don't understand. Nobody understands how it works. You have to be real smart like one of them. Unquestioning. For 33 years, Michael Cannon policed the streets of Toronto. Outside work, Cannon honed his financial skills and put money in investments that he hoped would reduce his Canadian tax bill. In the mid-2000s, Cannon paid about $20,000 into an offshore scheme marketed as a charitable deduction. It was a tax dodge, Canada's Revenue Authority later alleged. That lured investors such as Cannon with the possibility of receiving $10,000 in tax credit in exchange for a $2,500 donation, all in Canadian currency. Sort of sounds like the Nigerian scam to me. The Nigerian prince scam. He thought it was too good to be true, a Canadian judge wrote. It was. In 2009, Cannon became the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit in Canada on behalf of almost 10,000 investors, including nurses, teachers, and lawyers who had paid more than $100 million into the program. They had lost millions, they claimed, by the time Canada's tax office ruled the scheme invalid. The far-reaching legal action sought compensation from the promoters, lawyers, and advisors involved. One defendant was Edward Furtak, the so-called mastermind of the charity program. Appleby's Bermuda office was another. And these are the guys that are getting the rewards, remember. They're getting all kinds of awards. All kinds of business thrown their way. Part of the circle of magic offshore banks, dude. Whatever the hell that means. One of their other cool people clubs that we're not invited to. Lawyers for the investors allege that Appleby helped transfer hundreds of millions of dollars back and forth in a circular flow of funds that netted Furtak and his family $20 million. The investors' lawyers asserted that a monkey covering his eyes and ears may not have foreseen the risks to Canadian investors, but that Appleby had no such excuse. Nice to hear a lawyer saying that, considering I feel the same way. When you're involved in swapping all this money and you're involved in all these trades and billions of dollars, the I don't know what's going on excuse really doesn't work with me. In 2010, a judge found that there was a good case that Appleby had harmed people in Canada. Justice Strathy wrote that Appleby simply did what Furtek wanted it to do, despite its obligations to know where money came from and how it was used. Furtek was a long-standing Appleby client. Appleby had lent him $2.6 million to buy property on a verdant peninsula in Costa Rica and helped administer at least 3 offshore trusts for him, along with a 34-meter Jamaican-flagged yacht named Takapuna and worth at least $5 million. So it wasn't like they got fooled, right, by this scheme by Furtek. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were involved in, and they lent him money previously. They had a business relation with him previously, and they just acted like, no big deal. This is just how we do business around here at Appleby. The class action against Furtek was settled at an early stage, and Furtek denied wrongdoing. The tax program was designed in compliance with the law, and Furtek continues to believe in its propriety, his lawyers told ICIJ. The court case against Appleby rumbled on after Furtek settled. In 2013, Appleby's external lawyers told the firm's board of directors that the firm's role in the affair had been fairly limited, but relatively significant. Talk about using words as wind. What does that even mean? It was fairly limited, but relatively significant. So we started the whole entire thing, but then we had a hands-off approach. What does that even mean? There is some concern, the confidential board minutes noted, that the Bermuda office appears to have affected the various transfers in what has been described as an unquestioning manner. The lawyers warn that Appleby could be found liable of enriching itself at the investor's expense. In the courtroom, Appleby defended its behavior and promised to appeal any judgment against it to the highest court it could. Privately, Appleby had feared a penalty as high as $28.5 million, documents show. Oh, $28.5 million, that gets your attention, huh? But it wouldn't matter. They'd continue to do what they did, even if they had to pay that fine. At one stage, an Appleby employee, that one strategy was to wait this out in hope that the plaintiffs could run out of gas. Oh, they love to do that. When you're dealing with big-time rich folk here, they love to do that. They'll drag a court case out, hoping that you flounder, hoping that you run out of dough, because they won't. Cannon didn't give up, and Appleby settled the case in May 2017 for $12.7 million without admitting wrongdoing. And therein lies the biggest problem, folks. All right? They had to pay the dough, but they didn't admit to any wrongdoing, so they're just going to get up to it again. What's $12.7 million? Don't mean shit to them. The cost may be more than financial. Behind the scenes, some people at Appleby worried that it would take a really long time for the firm to absorb the financial and reputational impacts of the case. Any employee with a copy of the PowerPoint presentations prepared years before by Appleby's compliance team might have found it a good time to look back at this warning. Every new investigation that reveals an offshore trustee as a puppet on strings controlled by a criminal will be another nail in the industry's coffin. And boy, I wish the nails would come quicker, because this shit has to end. It has to be regulated, and these people have to be held responsible for the nonsense that they're involved in. And here you have it. That is Appleby. That is the company that was working with Jeffrey Epstein. That is a comprehensive look at who they are, the sort of shit they're involved in. And like usual, I'll leave it up to you folks to make your own decisions. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And to everybody who has donated to the podcast, I appreciate you all very much. All right, folks, I'll catch you later on tomorrow morning, and we will see what is going on in the weird and wacky world of Jeffrey Epstein.